73 minutes. That is how long it took for a 7-match winning streak to end. Not in a 5-setter. Not in a match that went to the wire. 73 minutes on center court in Toronto in front of thousands of Filipino fans who had turned Sobeys Stadium into a second home. Alex Eala had walked into the National Bank Open unbeaten on the North American hard court. She walked out of the round of 16 having lost 6-4, 6-0 to Belinda Bencic, and for the first time in 2 remarkable weeks, the story was not about how far she could go, it was about how much a body can take before it says enough. To understand what happened on that court, you have to go back to Washington. Eala had just won her first ever due-to-last singles title at the Mubadala City DC Open, a rain-delayed final that stretched across 2 days before she finally closed it out against Jessica Pegula, the world number 3. It was the kind of victory that should come with weeks of celebration, a signature moment in a career still being written, a moment that vindicated years of work that began long before anyone outside the sport was paying attention. In academies and junior circuits, where the promise was obvious but the results were still years away. Instead, there was barely time to celebrate before Toronto arrived. A bye in the first round bought her a little breathing room, but from there, the schedule turned relentless. The Toronto run itself had already produced its share of drama before Bencic ever entered the picture. Eala opened with a 3-set battle against Alicia Parks, dropping the middle set before closing it out 6-1, 4-6, 6-2, the kind of match that tests composure more than raw form. From there came a doubles outing alongside Venus Williams, a partnership that had already captured the imagination of fans across 2 generations of tennis. And then, on a Friday night that would test her in ways nobody expected, a 3rd-round singles battle against American Caty McNally. By this point, the accumulated toll of the summer was becoming impossible to ignore. 9 matches in 13 days, stretching from a rain-delayed final in the United States capital to a Masters-level draw in Canada, is the kind of schedule that would wear down players twice Eala's experience. At 21, still building the physical resilience that years on tour eventually provide, she was doing it in real time, match by match, with no real off day in sight. Eala took the first set comfortably, 6-3. She looked sharp, composed, in total control. Then, leading 3-2 in the second set, she hit a forehand and landed wrong. Her right ankle rolled beneath her. She won the game anyway, then immediately called for the physio. The bandage came out. The stadium, moments earlier alive with noise, went quiet as fans waited to see whether the run was already over. It was not, but it was not painless either. McNally sensed the opening and took it, breaking Eala's compromised movement to force a decider, winning the second set 7-5. Eala had the tape removed, trusted her legs, and fought her way back, closing out the match 6-3, 5-7, 6-4 after 2 hours and 39 minutes on court. Afterward, she was honest about what had happened. She had rolled her ankle, hit the forehand, landed wrong, and for a moment did not know what she had done, because it happened so fast. But there was relief in her voice too. Nothing serious, she said. No real damage. Still, the streak now stood at 7 straight wins, and the price of getting there was written all over her. That price came due against Bencic. The Swiss veteran arrived in career form of her own, a former Toronto champion from 2015, an Olympic gold medalist, and by a wide margin the player most comfortable on this particular court. 18 career wins at the National Bank Open, more than she has recorded at any other WTA 1000 event. Her next best tally sitting all the way back at 15 in Indian Wells. This was her 4th career quarter-final appearance in Toronto. Whatever Eala was walking into, she was walking into somebody else's happiest hunting ground. Still, the first set was a fight. Both players held serve comfortably through the opening stretch before Bencic finally broke through in the 9th game, closing it out 6-4, a scoreline tighter than what was coming. Then, something shifted. Eala, who had been grinding through her 4th match in 5 days, who had played 9 matches in 13 days if you count back to Washington, ran out of the one thing no amount of heart can replace. Legs. The second set disappeared in 6 straight games. There was no single moment of collapse, no visible crisis point, just a gradual draining away, point by point, the kind of erosion that only becomes obvious in hindsight. When you add up the return games she couldn't convert and the first serves that used to land deeper than they did that night, Bencic won 61% of the total points played across the match and converted 6 of her 10 break chances, her first serve landing at a blistering 64%, while Eala's own return game simply could not find its usual sting. It was not a competitive collapse, it was fatigue, plain and simple, arriving at the worst possible moment, against the worst possible opponent to be tired in front of. Up in the stands, the flags kept waving even as the second set slipped away without a single game won. That has been the story of this entire swing through Toronto. Filipino fans traveling into a Canadian stadium in numbers large enough to make Eala's matches feel, at times, like home game. It is a phenomenon that has followed her all summer, from Washington to here, the diaspora treating her run not as a curiosity to admire from a distance, but as something something worth showing up for in person. Even in defeat, that support did not waver. Eala took a long moment to acknowledge it before she left the court, soaking in an ovation that had nothing to do with the scoreline. There is a particular kind of heartbreak in watching an athlete get outplayed, not by nerves or bad luck, but by the accumulated weight of doing too much, too well, for too long. Eala did not choke against Bencic. She simply had nothing left to give after 2 straight weeks of the best tennis of her career. And yet, there was something telling in how she competed even while running on empty. She did not tank the second set. She did not go through the motions. She kept swinging, kept moving on an ankle that had been taped 48 hours earlier, kept trying to find a way back into points she no longer had the legs to win. That refusal to fold, even in a lost cause, is its own kind of statement about who she is as a competitor. What made the loss easier to sit with, if anything could, was the way Eala handled it afterward. There was no deflection, no excuse-making. It is always tough after a loss, she admitted, but she was quick to frame the bigger picture. She had just come through 2 of the biggest weeks of her career, a maiden title and a run to the second week of a WTA 1000 event, and she called it exactly that, a really big positive. She had gotten through so many obstacles, she said, and there was something in that phrase that felt bigger than tennis. A 21-year-old talking about survival, not just scorelines. She admitted the tiredness too, calling it a little tired and down from the match. The kind of quiet honesty that mature fans respect far more than forced positivity. And then came the part of the press conference that told you everything about where her head actually was. No talk of crisis, no talk of a body breaking down, just a plan. 2 days off, maybe a day or 2, she said, before the travel to Cincinnati begins. A haircut long overdue, her nails grown out from weeks with no time to spare for herself. A chance to reunite with friends in Cincinnati and just have fun, to get her mind off tennis for a moment before diving back in. And on the question that mattered most to every fan watching, she was direct. "I'm healthy," she said, "and that's something I'm super grateful for. It's always on top of my priority list." This was not an athlete in crisis. This was an athlete who understands the difference between hurting and breaking, and who was choosing deliberately to rest rather than push through blindly. That distinction matters, and it is not one every 21-year-old has the self-awareness to make. At a career-high ranking of number 20 in the world, having already beaten multiple Grand Slam champions and an Olympic medalist along the way, Eala has nothing left to prove by grinding herself into the ground. The wiser move, and the one she made, is to let 2 days become genuine recovery before the next battle begins. Because the next battle is close. The Cincinnati Open opens on August 13th, another WTA 1000 event, another massive test on the road to the US Open at the end of the month. Eala has never played Cincinnati before, having withdrawn the previous year with a shoulder issue. This will be new ground, arriving on the back of arguably the best fortnight of her career and arriving tired. But tired is not the same as broken, and the numbers back her up. 7 straight wins before Toronto ended it. A maiden WTA title, a career-high ranking of world number 20, a number that keeps climbing every time she steps on court and keeps her firmly in the conversation for a strong seed heading into New York. A fan base that filled a foreign stadium with the colors of home and refused to stop believing, even as the second set slipped away without a single game won. Bencic, for her part, was gracious in victory, thanking the crowd for their support even knowing exactly who they had come to see. She now moves on to face Coco Gauff in the quarterfinals, a rematch of sorts after Gauff beat her in the 4th round at Wimbledon earlier this year. And she was quick to acknowledge just how dangerous that matchup is. Gauff, she said, is someone who always puts herself in position to win. A great champion, very tricky to play against. High praise from a former champion of this very tournament, and a reminder of just how deep the competition runs at the top of this sport. The same level Eala is now fighting her way toward with every result like this one. For Eala, the road simply bends towards Cincinnati and then New York, carrying the lessons of these 2 weeks with her, the good and the exhausting. Belinda put me in some tough situations, she reflected afterward. I think she played really well. I wasn't able to get myself out of a certain mode. There was no bitterness in it, just the clear-eyed assessment of a player who already knows this will not be the last time she stands across the net from someone at Bencic's level, and who intends to be ready the next time it happens. There is a version of this story that plays it as an emergency, a career threatened, a body giving out. That is not what happened in Toronto. What happened was simpler and, in its own way, more impressive. A young player pushed herself to the very edge of what her body could give, won more than she lost along the way, and then had the judgment to stop before that edge became something worse. It usually takes years of learning the hard way, of pushing through one injury too many before an athlete understands that cost. Eala appears to be learning it now, in real time, on the biggest stage of her young career, and choosing rest not as a retreat, but as a strategy. The streak is over. The ranking is not. 2 weeks that began with a maiden title in Washington and ended with a hard-fought exit in Toronto have still left her better off than when they started. A career high rank, a signature win over a top American, a deepened bond with a fan base that shows up wherever she plays, on whichever continent, in whatever weather. The story unmistakably continues. If you have been following Alex Eala's run through this hard-court summer, this is the moment to stay close. Cincinnati is next, and after that, New York. Subscribe and let's watch the next chapter together.